Hey, it's Brian from Super Easy Toots, and in this tutorial we're going to continue with loops and discuss the while loop. First off, if we don't know how many times a loop will execute, we can't use a for loop because that's defined by a certain number of times it's gonna loop through. So what we want to look at is a while loop, and basically the format of a while loop is the keyword while, and then in the parentheses the condition that either makes this true and executes the code, or makes it false and makes it skip this section. So an example program that I wrote here, a very simple one. Let's say you want to create a program that allows you and your buddies to put in the number of drinks you had over a certain period of time and calculate the average. So that's what I've done here, created this program. And basically this code asks the user to enter a number that they drank over an undefined period, and the while loop will continue to run, continue to loop until prompted by the user. Now inside the while loop are variables, you can see right here, are going to be modified, so when the while loop is finished we can calculate an average and output that. So now the breakdown on this code, I'm going to go through this real simply for you. Basically we created three integer variables. The first one is beers. We didn't assign it a value, and it's going to represent the number of beers drank on a given night. And then we have beer sum, and this is a variable that's going to keep track of the total number of beers drank over the total period, over all the nights or days if you're a severe alcoholic, over the total amount over that period. And then beer count is going to keep track of the number of nights that the period over the period, and that's going to basically be the denominator in our equation when we calculate the average. And then the next two lines of code is just an output and an input. Basically we're prompting the user to enter the number of drinks they had in the first night, or -1 to quit, so that gives them the ability to get out of the program. And then whatever number they hit, whatever value that they enter, is going to be stored as our variable that we created up here, beers. So now the next portion of the code is the while loop, and basically inside the parentheses we have the condition, and as long as this is true, the code that follows will execute. So if from above the user entered a negative value for beers, then this code will not execute. As long as the user entered 0 or greater, then this while loop will execute because this is true. And what's happening inside our while loop is the beer count is going to be incremented by 1, which is, if you recall, the beer count is the number of nights over the period, and then beer sum plus equals beers is going to increment our beer sum, which is our total number of beers that we're keeping track of, by the number of beers entered. So we start off with a beer sum of 0, that's up in the code here, and then whatever this value is that's entered by the user is added to that, and that's the new beer sum total. And then we have the code almost exactly from above. We're just doing another output statement. The only thing that's different is the word next, and you're getting a value from the user and entering that value into beers, and then the loop will continue to execute. And as long as the user inputs a positive integer or 0 in here, this code will continue to run. It will continue to loop. So then the next portion is where we're calculating the average, and we basically created a float variable because the average obviously is going to involve a decimal point, and we've taken the beer sum, the total number of beers drank, and we're dividing that by the total number of nights over that period. So for example, the total number of drinks could be 16, total number of nights could be 4, and that's going to output 4 as an average and store that into beer average. And then we're going to print out beer average on an output statement here. Basically a very simple output statement. So we're going to go over to Quincy, and you can see here that I have this code in here. It's exactly what was described in the notes. So we're going to debug and run this. I do have an if statement down here. I just added in for some stupid humor, and I know that I'm stupid, but that's alright. If the beer average is less than 7, it's going to output you drink like a little girl. And if the beer average is greater than 7, you're going to be a professional. Now maybe your requirements for professional and drinking like a little girl are different, and you can modify those however you want. So we'll debug and run this, and we see we're prompted here. Enter the number of beers you drank on the first night. We'll say I'm going to keep this simple and just enter 3. And then the next night, you see the text did change here, and we'll keep it 3, and we'll do 3, and we'll say that that's going to basically be the end of our drinking period. So I'll just put in -1, and then they calculated the average to 3. So now we can let's try it and try and get in that professional range here. Say the first night was 16, second night was a monster night, 22. And we had an off night of 9, and then maybe we had our lady over and only had 2. So then we want to get out of this. I'm just going to hit -5 to show you that as long as there's a negative value. So the average number is 12. You're a professional and you can drink with me anytime. However, there's one stipulation here. This is not a decimal value. This is outputting an integer. And in our code here, if we see we created a float variable and defined it, named it beer average, but it's only giving us an integer value because we're dividing 2 integers here. Beer sum and beer count are 2 integers. So something called typecast that you can do, and basically if you put this in parentheses, put float in parentheses, you're going to see that keyword that's going to highlight in blue now, and basically it's going to take this value and make it a float value. So now when we run this, we're going to see our output, as long as it's not a whole number, will show up with the decimal. So we'll do our power drinking again. And sure enough, we have the decimal value there, 13.75. You're professional. So that's something that we didn't really cover. This typecast, that's another thing you can add and throw in your toolbox. And that's really about it as far as while loops go. Pretty simple. Main things to remember are make sure your condition is properly set. No semicolon after the end of this. That's about it for while loops.